Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Austin Downbeat. This is number 7 for us. Can you believe it? I can't, and I can. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, it's a really big help if you just click that red subscribe button. It's amazing what that will do for this gal. The rundown for today, for this week, covers April 5th. Happy birthday to my childhood best friend, Kim. You know who you are. April 5th through April 11th. And here we go with the rundown. Tuesday, today, at the Mohawk, we have The Darkness. Tomorrow, Wednesday, at 04 Center, we have Masterson with the Whitmore Sisters. Thursday at 04 Center, we have Sean Colvin, and guess who's opening up for her? Our dear, dear friend of the show and in life, Pat Byrne. So good and really excited for him on that. That's a big thing for him. Friday at Round Rock Amphitheater, we have Snoop Dogg. And Saturday at Emos, we have Poppy. So I just played back my interview with our guest today is Ben Jones. You know him from being one half of Beetroot Revival. He and Andrea Magee are so good, so good. But he, after 8 years of kind of focusing on that and just collecting songs, has put out his first solo project called Souvenir. So we talk about that. And then, we just talk about so many different things. I was watching it back and it was like super deep and good and, mixing in the depth of life and awareness about just this kind of silly stuff that we do on the surface of life, and what it means and how to kind of get through that with your feet really planted in the ground. He comes across as someone who is just always listening to what's happening around him. He's a really good conversationalist, whether it's here or just in person. And I'm really pleased to get to know him here and spend some time with him. So please enjoy. I hope you do. And without further ado, Ben Jones. Awesome. All right. Well, Ben Jones, welcome to the show. It's so lovely to have you on.
I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I've been watching you from across
the room. What? Through the window?
Yeah, I'm actually right outside your house.
Yeah, right. Nice curtains, man. Yeah, I'm just glad that we're a couple of weeks removed and we survived South by.
Yeah, that's one of the things I want to talk to you about, because I've been watching you in different ways, but certainly on social media, everyone's been so slammed during South by.
Yeah.
And I mean, how are you feeling? Just absolutely exhausted /
No, I mean, it's funny. I decided to really temper it this year. I didn't. I did one thing a day. I had one day where I had 2 shows, and the second show was in Houston. So that was the busy day. But beyond that, no. Annoyingly, I didn't get to go out and see anyone play, which would have been wonderful. But just because of the way that it worked out timing-wise of everything, I kind of missed out on that. But again, there's pluses and minuses to the whole carnival of South by, and I think. I'm probably not the only one who was not dreading it a little bit, but you kind of think after 2 years off, I was thinking, oh no, there's going to be a deluge of people. It's just going to be pandemonium. And I was pleasantly surprised this year. It was like, it wasn't nearly as kind of crazy as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And everyone I met seemed to be in such good spirits. And like, that part was lovely. And ordinarily I'm used to it just being a little bit of a circus, so yeah. I'm pleasantly surprised. Yeah, I took a couple of days at the end afterwards to just not do anything, switch off the phone and just slept.
Yeah. What else do you do to take care of yourself in not only extreme situations like that coming down off of South by, but just in general? What is your go-to if it's not, if not music, but anything other than that? Like what do you do to kind of fill the other half of you?
I mean, for me, really, I mean, it's funny. I'm not your archetypal go-getter. So it took me a long time to figure that out. Honestly, it took me I mean, I'm 39, and it took me probably up to last year to realize why I was walking around with this feeling of dread all the time. And I think a lot of it was to do with trying to live up to what you think other people are expecting of you. Ooh. So, you know, as in like, and I don't mean like family and stuff like that. I mean, as in, you know, there's that pressure of that everyone who believes in you and kind of gets on your train as you go along, your friends, family, your fans, whatever that is, you know, like that kind of this growing little village that makes it possible for you to do what you want to do. Mm-hmm. There is that part where you go, oh, everyone gauges everything, I guess, in benchmarks. It's like, you know, you get a record out and it sells a bunch of, you know, whatever it is. And so because I've always been, you know, fiercely independent, but then when I made the move to the United States, and Andrea and I, my musical partner in Beat Revival, there's that, I think for the longest time, as I say, I walked around with this cloud over my head of thinking, why, you know, we were, you know, getting ahead, inverted commas, you know, it was very much like we were getting these great opening slots for big name people and getting these experiences that other people would have just been so, you know, given their right arm for. And I, not in an ungrateful way, but I just didn't feel fulfilled. I was like, there's obviously something wrong with me. And it was just that whole, the chasing the dream thing was never my motivating factor. That wasn't my catalyst for it. I think it was just the process. You know, I love the process. Mm-hmm. I love to play. I love to write. I love to record. I love to meet people after shows. So to answer your question, the long way of like that, you know, is that I think I buy into the whole thing of the social aspect of it. As in, that's how I, you know, when I get to go to shows of other people, mm-hmm. that's what I got into it for in the first. I'm a fan of music. So it's like, so outside of that, I mean, I like to hike. I really like to hike around Austin. You know, it's great being on the Greenbelt, being so close. Yeah. I love to read. That's my safe place. That is my solace. It's like I always spend far too much money in half-price books and on my thrift books app that I have on my telephone. And the real definition of Netflix and chill, not the kids version. You know, I do literally like to watch as much streaming television that I really like as possible. You know, so in between all of that, you know, that's when I fit everything else into it.
Yeah. Let's go back to that kind of expectation. Do you feel like, are you a pleaser by nature? Where do you fall in line in your family? Do you
Again,
fall
I mean, it's funny. My role has shifted over the years. I'm the youngest of 5 children. Oh. So I came along at a point where my dad was on his 3rd marriage. Obviously like wedding cake. But my mum was a lot younger than my dad. So my dad was 40 at that point. My mum was 29. So I became like his chance of getting to do the adult parenting thing properly. As in, because when he was, you know, he had 2 children by the time he was 21.
Wow.
And he was 21 in 1963. So it's like, that was when everything was exploding in London. You know, it was like the whole, you know, Beatlemania and, you know, all of that. My dad was a musician at the same time as well. So my role has shifted a lot because I was the baby, you know, so I was doted on, and so I think there was a lot of an expectation on me as well. But because I grew up in an environment that wasn't always the healthiest environment for your psyche, I was an inquisitive child, but I wasn't a gregarious child. I wasn't like obnoxious and in your face, mainly just because I was frightened of the consequences. So it took me getting into my adult years to shift my perspective of that role that I filled. So I think for a large period of time, yeah, I've been a pleaser in a lot of ways, but I think that's been more so to justify to myself. There's a selfish part of it, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
But now these days, I don't know. I try my best to be whatever I feel is my authentic self, as in to be as present as I can be and to be as mindful. I know that's one of those buzzwords these days, but I do believe in it. It's that to be as committed as you can be to what it is that you're doing at any given time. So I try not to oversubscribe myself. I try not to say yes to too many things. I only say yes to the things I really want to do.
Yeah.
With the people I really want to do them with. And that can sometimes be counterproductive on the level of what people perceive as, you know, making it, you know, because I don't, and it's not because I'm difficult, but I can be perceived that way because I don't want to play that game. It makes me miserable. It actually, and it's made me ill. It made me very ill before. We were out on the road with a big name person, and I got 5 weeks into the tour and was on the verge of breakdown. Whereas most people would have just been like, yeah, I had 5 weeks on a tour bus. I was just like, having an existential crisis, and not in like a dramatic poor me kind of way, but like it was just it just none of it felt right.
Right.
And it wasn't the part I was chasing. So, but to answer your original question, I'm sorry, because I can go off on tangents on these things, but because it suggests
you're saying really great stuff, because I think what you're saying is of value, because the other thing that's coming to mind is another buzzword, but boundaries, you know?
Yeah.
You've sounds like you've created a great relationship with the concept of having boundaries. And you know what?
It's taken a long time though, like it does for all of us, you know, I mean, especially, and you'll know it yourself, in any creative endeavor that we try and translate into a vocation. The problem comes with the balance, you know, because you've got the rest of society around you, whether it be your immediate friends and family or what, but there's always going to be judgment. Even if you want to be non-judgmental yourself, I mean, in England, the typical response to anyone who says, oh, I'm a musician for a living, or I'm a songwriter, is, oh, have we heard anything on the radio?
Of course.
And if they haven't, you're deemed a failure. You're not a success. You're not a success unless you're Ed Sheeran or you're Adele. You know, it's like anyone else. But yet, and I think that's our, you know, culturally, it's the way we've been kind of all been brought up. It's that whole idea of, you know, little kids should be seen and not heard. You shouldn't be braggart or celebratory of yourself and all that kind of, whereas American culture is different. America loves a winner. They love to encourage everyone to sort of, you can do whatever you want. Whether or not that's realistic or not, it is almost beside the point.
Right.
But it took me a long time to get through all of that. And I still feel like I'm only at the start of it, but to establish some boundaries for myself, because I think you can spread yourself thin very, very easily and still find yourself, you know, your own well ends up getting empty. And you give it away to things and to people that, I'm not saying that people aren't worth it, but I'm saying as in your own in your own bubble, in your own little, you know, your own comfort area, we don't always make the best choices initially in our lives of who is trustworthy and who is loyal and all of it. So
sure,
you know,
and that gets harder the bigger your circle gets, and
absolutely,
and so then, I mean, I think we hear that from people at every level of
in anything. But I think if you do something that's public, whether you're famous or not, you know, I'm not famous, but I'm known within my community enough to know that I have a social responsibility all the time, as in I can't go and act the way that someone in the crowd can act, because I'm selling something, my product, if you like, and I hate that word in what we do, but it's me. So it's that you have to establish boundaries for your own safety and security. I remember watching a great interview with Bruce Springsteen, and he talked about the two Bruce Springsteens that existed, you know, the public Bruce Springsteen and the private Bruce Springsteen. But the way that he ended up putting it across was great, because he just said, you know, sometimes there's that guy who likes to drop in with his baseball cap pulled down low to a strip bar just to have a beer, not because he really wants to stare at the women, but because he knows he's not going to get bothered in there.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he said, but there's the other part where obviously it's all of these people, they give you your standing, they give you your position, because without them, you play in your bedroom, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But what I'm saying is, if you put yourself out there to try and make a living from it,
Mm-hmm.
there's always that compromise. And I guess the boundaries for me have just come about through, trial and error. And luckily for me, honestly, the Austin community, I feel that we've become a part of, is such a wonderful bunch of people.
Yeah.
There's very rare times that you meet someone who invades your space. The space invaders, you'll get the occasional one, but not really. It's like and I think particularly on the level that we operate on, the thing I like about it is I like not being famous. I like being someone who is motivated by just the thing, because then it doesn't make you any more important than anybody else or what anybody else is doing. You're not trying to pretend that, I'm giving something meaningful to the fabric of my culture. It's like, if you fool yourself with that for long enough, then you just get derailed anyway. And then arguably, whatever your artistic expression is, that it cheapens that anyway. Whereas whereas I always think, if you look at it as, it's the same as making friends. Not everyone is going to like you, but that doesn't mean that they're bad people, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you're not for everybody. And it's the same as art. Art is not for everybody, and pop culture is not for everybody. It's like, don't take it too seriously, and it'll all be fine. And then you can meet people just on the level of being like, I've met this great person. Andrea, my musical partner, she's the best one for it. And it used to drive me up the wall when we were first playing together, because she never knows who anyone is. We can meet well-known people, and she's like, I haven't got a clue. And this has happened several times with really well-known people.
Oh, no.
Whereas the beauty of it is, I can look at it on the flip side now, of she meets people just as people. Mm-hmm. And that's a great thing, because it's then you're not
distracted.
You're not like, you're just being yourself.
Yeah.
And I admire that,
I love that. I love that, because then it just really allows you to just be who you are. I mean, that's one of the things that I love. When I find myself in waiting in line somewhere, wherever, just where there's people, and, we see people with our eyes first, and that's how we judge immediately. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. So I've trained myself over the years just to be like, I'll look at someone, kind of feel myself judging them, or just coming up with some sort of, conclusion. And then, and then the next thought that I try to do, I'm not perfect at it, but I think like, they have a secret gift that I don't know about, and I wonder what it is. And I go into like the curiosity part. And it's kind of similar to like how Andrea is, where it just kind of sheds that bullshit. And just, we get to see each other just as human beings. Yeah, maybe you've done some cool stuff and a lot of people know about it. But at the end of the day, like, you can be a dick. Totally. You can be really great, just like me. Yeah.
There's a total reason why for years and years people always said, don't meet your heroes.
Right.
Because it's like the moment that you discover that your parents aren't superheroes. You have to readjust all of your thought process, and I mean, the argument can be made, and I've had friends who've done this, and I don't have children, but I have friends who have children, and there's always that argument of, do you allow a child to believe in Santa Claus? Do you allow them to believe in the Tooth Fairy? All of those things. And I've heard several arguments on both sides of the coin that sound perfectly reasonable to me. Yeah. In my mind, I'm like, of course you should indulge the fantasy and all that kind of thing. But then there's the other argument of going, well, particularly these days, considering how certain factions of society have become very apathetic, and other factions of society have become so empathetic. It's like, do you really want to risk the idea, you know, some people see that as lying to a child or something, you know. And so when you look at that in the bigger picture of going, oh, people look at Elvis this way, or Bob Dylan, or like, it's like,
Yeah.
I can guarantee with even the limited experiences I've had around several famous people, it's like, it is just like that scene in The Wizard of Oz where they realize that it's a man behind the curtain, and you don't buy into it. It's like, again, without sounding crass, it's just that whole thing of, you know, you can only sleep in one bed, you can only shit in one toilet. It doesn't really, you know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't matter how wealthy you are or how much power or influence.
Yeah.
The ending is going to be the same for all of us.
Exactly. There's a lot of freedom in that, of letting go of these constructs, right? That we sort of create and get ourselves trapped in.
Totally. But isn't it funny though? Like, you look at kids. I've got, again, friends who've got kids, and I was at Lucy's Fried Chicken just recently during South by, and one of my friends was there with her young son, and I looked at him just like enjoying everything, and I just thought, isn't it wonderful? Like, he's at that age yet where he's totally unspoiled by expectation and by disappointment and by experience. It's like, and yet we as humans, if we're fortunate enough, we get surrounded by people who can turn us on to the idea of, you know, self-help, however, whatever form that comes in, whether you go to therapy, whether you whether you have a psychiatrist, or whether you read self-help books, or whether you meditate, or whether you become religious, whatever it is that works for you. But that we end up spending all of this time trying to undo all of that stuff that happens from the age that we start to become aware to the point that we accept that we've got some problems. And it's so sad, because there's that whole idea of this time that we have is so finite. Doesn't matter what we believe comes afterwards. It's irrespective, because the now is the now. Right. So it's like, I just think to myself, we end up putting so much on our shoulders when it comes to all of this stuff. I know. And that's why I struggle with the whole doing this thing anyway. Not struggle to do it, I mean, but struggle with the whole, I can't play that game. I get so uncomfortable with the whole, oh, well, now you've got to say good things about yourself, and you've got to write good things about, and it's not that we can't love ourselves, but it's like, you've got to sell yourself in a manner that makes it seem like you really think highly of yourself. And to me, I'm just like, I don't think that's where the intention should lie. I don't know though. With some people, I don't know. I mean, I know people, I know artists, like I'm sure you do, who really believe their own thing. Bullshit. Yeah. And it's like, I think people are smarter than that. I think people can see through that. I appreciate, let's talk a little bit about your music. I was listening to it a lot. I'm curious what your influences are, even though that's such a cheesy question, but I am curious of who inspires you. You have this, I wrote it down. You have this consistent, like, specificity in your lyrics, which I love. I love when people are specific and they decide to tell you something, and they're going to tell you all of it. And they're going to, like, walk you through. I love songs like that. And then, like, your phrasing and your lyrics stay really dynamic along with the melodies. So it's like, I'm like paying attention to your phrasing and your lyrics, of course, but that melody is like, it's like the perfect little bra for your words. It's just, everything's just working and holding each other up. Really, really cool. And you have, like, happy, the sound. I'm thinking of, like, what's the one that your video is? Rain Rain Down on Me. Yeah, so, like, that song. So it's like, you know, it's not like the message in the song is that everything's great and, you know, but it's like, it sounds like it is. And I love that contrast when people write like that, like break my heart beautifully, you know, like, that's break it in the most beautiful way. That's a lovely way of putting it. Break your heart beautifully. Yeah. I always used to joke that I'd say I could write sad songs with happy tunes.
Yeah,
But
well, okay, good. So we're
yeah,
tracking here because I think
yeah, no, I'm glad that comes across, because
it does.
I don't feel like you can ever be truly objective about your own work anyway. You can either, you can
I
just,
agree.
there's certain things of your own
Because it's
work,
a
whether
part
it's
of you.
painting, whether it's songs that you like, but you hope that that comes across to others. I
Yeah.
mean, that's an older song, That Rained Down on Me, but it still rings
Yeah.
true in my writing, which is
Hmm.
that musically my influences are different to what my influences are lyrically, probably. As
Okay.
in, I used to really love, I mean, like kitchen sink productions, as in like Phil Spector, the
Yeah.
Beach Boys, Pet Sounds, the
Yeah.
Beatles, sort of Sergeant Pepper period. I
Uh-huh.
love elaborate things. The Move, another 60s band I really love, their songwriter Roy Wood. And like, it's just like anything that would get really involved with cross-pollination of musical influences and sounds. But lyrically, I love I love Bob Dylan. I mean, I mean, you can't not love Bob Dylan. I think if you love music, you can't really not love Bob Dylan. I know there's people of the school of they either like his voice or they don't. I love his voice, or all of his voices. All of them. I love them.
Yeah.
But some of his lyrics can be a little bit abstract. Some of them can be right on the nose. But I love Leonard Cohen.
I
As a
just
lyricist,
I just bought his greatest hits album, the vinyl.
so good. I mean, he was so good. But even right up to when he died, to me, he was still. I mean, playing into what you've actually asked for about me going on a tangent is like, I love artists that are continual. I'm not, and the strange thing is like, if I get into someone, I'm always interested in what they're doing now, if they're
Hmm.
still alive, rather than going, oh, well, all of their great stuff was when they were young. It's like, I do not subscribe to that at all. I
Okay.
think you listen to Bob Dylan, you listen to Leonard Cohen, you listen to McCartney, there's certain aspects of their work, yes, when they, particularly McCartney, he's a good example. When they pander to what they think the industry wants from them,
Hmm.
it's lesser than when they just do what they want. And yeah, I'm not trying to make the argument that, oh, McCartney's songs these days are as magical as the Beatles. But what I'm saying is, as an artist, his expression is like, I love hearing what 79-year-old McCartney has to say,
Hmm.
just as much as I love hearing what 23-year-old McCartney had to say, because that's his life, that's his life experience. And it's like, we'd all have to be stupid to say, as far as I'm aware, Einstein didn't come up with his theory of relativity until he was older. It's like he didn't come up with it when he was in his 20s. It's like, so I figure that. And the same with Stephen Hawking. He started to develop those things, and as time went on, but yet we can see it with scientists, or we can see it with economists, or sociologists, social thinkers, but yet we don't seem to apply it to artists, because we all, the whole youth is king kind of thing. And yet I can honestly say, like I say, I'm about to turn 40, and I'm like, I feel like the one thing I've learned is that I know fucking nothing. You know what I mean? As in, like, because there's still things that happen all the time that completely knock me off the rails. And, so if I'm honest, my influences have changed, because they've become more about, like, I think you grow into certain people. Like I said, there's obvious ones. To me, Neil Young, Bob Dylan, the Beatles, the Beach Boys, Leonard Cohen. There's some obvious ones there. But then I think there's people like Joni Mitchell, who you actually have to mature into being. See, when I was younger, I could understand it from the point of view of going, oh yeah, I can hear she's great. But I couldn't appreciate her as a songwriter then the way that I do now, because there's so much more depth to her songs than there are to, say, a lot of Bob Dylan songs even. And that's not to say there's not depth. There's great depth to them. But what I mean is, she was writing about things that none of those guys could even relate to when they were in their 20s, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I could. I certainly couldn't, you know. And I think, so I feel like if you invest in the artists that you love, and then you piggyback onto other artists based on that little tree that comes out of it, you go, oh, well, I love Springsteen. So
Right.
from that, you get on to, you know, Little Steven, or you go on to, you know, Southside Johnny, whatever. It's like you'll have that thing that grows, that widens your appreciation for certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And as time goes with that, hopefully you grow with it, you know, as in like you'll go back to certain albums and you'll go, oh, I get it now. It just, you know.
Mm-hmm. So, question for you. Is there a part of that that we can overlay over your art, what you're putting out, and kind of flip the coin? Is there a lesson for you there? And it all kind of ties back to what we've already talked about just kind of forgetting the bullshit and playing the game and just absolutely being in who you are, what you're meant to put out. Because if people aren't getting it, just wait a minute, they will.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, there's no better example of that than, like, you look at the big things in life. Like, I always say this to any friends who are worried about, oh, well, I'm not getting anywhere, you know, whatever they perceive as getting somewhere. I'm like, do you know, Vincent van Gogh didn't sell one painting in his lifetime. And that's devastating. I think that's devastating. And yet now he's the most famous painter on earth. Mm-hmm. And he's the drama that goes along with his story, they celebrate it rather than looking at it as a cautionary tale of this poor man who had undiagnosed mental health issues. Mm-hmm. And so I hope, I mean, I've been making records for 19 years. Wow. So I made my first record when I was 21. And after that, I made, basically, when I was about 24, since I was 24, I've made virtually a record every year or every 2 years, at least. Wow. And I've been involved in something. And I like to think you grow. Obviously, you like to think you grow with each thing. But for whatever my ability is, and I think everyone's is different, it's not about that comparative thing. If I'm good at something technically, that's great, but if I'm good at something in a way that speaks to someone else, great. But I know it's not going to resonate with everyone. But for me personally, I feel like I'm only just getting to the essence of who I am as a songwriter, as in my own honesty. If art is supposed to be your true expression, rather than it just being, I want to write songs that people are going to dance to or people are going to buy. The songs that I've written in the last 2 or 3 years, to me, are the best things I've ever done. And it's not that they're the best because of the technical, they're the best because they're the most honest. They're the ones that I listen to and I go, I'm comfortable with that. Mm-hmm.
Because, it's a good representation of who you are.
Because it's honest. It's that much more honest than I feel like I used to be. Yeah. I think I used to concentrate so much on the technicality, not in a sort of jazzy way. I don't mean like that. I don't mean like technicality, the time signatures or but I mean, I was so interested in making what I thought was a sonically interesting record that I cared about the lyrics, but I didn't care whether or not they were meaningful to me. I just cared whether or not they were poetic or whether they were, sounded good. Whereas now I feel like, particularly coming here as well, like living in Austin the last 8 years and having more exposure to things that I'd only touched upon before I came here. I'd never gotten into Guy Clark the way that I am now, or Towns. I knew certain songs. Mm-hmm. I knew LA Freeway because of Jerry Jeff, and I knew Pancho and Lefty because of Willie. But then when you get into these other things, particularly of Guy Clark, for me, you listen to honest songwriting, like really someone who's really crafting their truth. Right. There's, even though it's crafted, it's no less honest. And I think it's that. Someone said this to me a little while ago. They were like, not everyone who's come out of Austin stays in Austin, you know, but none of them leave without being better songwriters than they were before they arrived. And I think if you're smart enough, you open your ears, you know, you listen to what's going on around you, what your friends are doing, what other people are doing. And so I like to think all of us should be taking influence from everything. Like even what you just said, when you said, you know, break my heart beautifully. I mean, what a lovely phrase that is. What a lovely, the songwriter, the songwriter in you goes, wow, that's a really great, do you know what I mean? But that's what I think influence should be. Another one of my friends said something a little while ago, and I put that in a song, which was, he said, I was talking about, I had a bit of a hard time last year with a breakup and whatnot. And he said, he said, how are you doing? I was like, you know, up and down. And he said, you know, it comes in fits and starts until it finally starts to fit.
Oh.
And I thought, wow, that's a great line. I was like, I'm having that, because it really related to what I was going through. And in the song that I was able to write out of it, you know, but it was like, I think you should be able to take influence like that from around you. You know, it's like,
yeah,
we can't all teach each other something, then we're doing it wrong. You know, I mean,
yeah. I got some great advice. I used to be an actor, and I got some really great advice when I was in a class. And the guy said, be interested, not interesting.
Yeah, right.
That's it. And that's all I ever really needed to remember when I would be in auditions, is just like, it kind of cut through the bullshit of like,
yeah.
I'm not going to try to be interesting. I'm just going to be who I am. I'm just going to show up, do what I need to do, pour out what comes out.
Yeah.
And also keep my ears open and listen and ask questions and be curious and try as much as possible to walk through life like that.
Yeah, right.
You know, but obviously we're human.
It's like that. I've always found that interesting about actors as well, because it's such an interesting expression of art, acting, because it's very vulnerable, because you're having to put your own stamp upon something that's been created for you. So it's someone else's words, but you have to make them your own. And I've always found that fascinating. It's like, because from a songwriter's point, that's like interpreting a song. Each person's interpretation is going to be very, very different. You know, we've all heard multiple versions of the same song, and certain versions of songs speak to us and certain ones don't, you know.
Yeah.
And that, even like the idea, I mean, Bob Dylan is a good example of that, I always think, because of like there's people who much prefer the Byrds version of Mr. Tambourine Man to his, for example. But yet you'll get other people who are purists, and they're like, well, no, that was the way he intended it to be.
Right.
And I think the same thing when you look at, I don't know whether, you know, like when you look at Shakespeare plays, there'll be people who, because they saw someone do Richard III, and they'll be like, that's the ultimate version of Richard. And then they'll be, well, no, what about this, you know, or Macbeth, you know, and you just think,
yeah.
But I find that fascinating, because like I have a relative amount of control over what I do and how it's presented. But whereas with acting, it's like it's all, particularly live acting as well, I think, particularly on the stage, it's like it's all got to be emotional, as in, and it's going to be affected by how you're feeling at that point.
Yeah.
How long did you do that for?
I did that through my 20s, and then I went into like behind the scenes production for TV. And
so
then
you did both sides of it.
Yeah, I did
both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
Which
But
did you
behind the scenes
prefer?
is more interesting. Behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, I miss being in front of the camera, but now I'm here. So.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I definitely learned so much about myself and all the things that we're talking about today, and all the things that I can
I was going to ask you, actually, do you feel like it brought out, do you feel like it taught you how to be yourself more, because you had to try and embody something else? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I hear that. No, I think the self-awareness came differently and outside of that.
Yeah,
For me, acting was was a real safe place for me to detach
That's
and
good. That's
escape.
interesting.
But
Yeah, right.
I could always draw upon my experiences, and it was very easy for me to use that,
Yeah, yeah.
um, and call upon those things when I needed them, and cry if I needed to cry. Like
Right.
that,
Yeah.
that
That's,
was
see, that's
really
amazing
easy
though.
for
Because I
me.
mean, that's the reason I say it. The reason I ask is obviously from a musical standpoint, and that's the only, area I have to draw from. I've written things, but it's like I've only ever been a performer as a musician. I've not been an actor. So it's like it I always find that fascinating, because you see some people who their personality, their real true personality, lies within what they put into their work that's acting,
Mhm.
because that's their sole focus. Whereas what you've said seems to me far more profound, at
Mhm.
least as a observer or as a receiver, because it's like you had already figured out that was just the expressive part. That wasn't who you were. Whereas you'll
Yeah.
see some very, very wildly successful actors, but their life, their actual real life it's in pieces, because they don't seem to figure that out.
Yeah, I think I've always been good at, and I still am, at compartmentalizing. And
Yeah.
I've had therapists tell me that that's not healthy. But I'm like, it's working really well for me. I'm really
Yeah, I
good
don't know. I
at
mean,
compartmentalizing and
no,
going
yeah.
like, I can be standing here and I can put my bucket in that well. And I can, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's really
Yeah.
good, because I unfortunately am not good at compartmentalizing. I really am not. I suck at it. Hence why, you end up in that. My own expression is only ever one track minded. It's like, if I'm in love, I'm really in love, or if I'm
Mm.
sad, I'm really fucking sad. It's like, I really admire that, because I think it's character development as a person. If you can compartmentalize, you're giving yourself the permission to realize that you don't have to suffer all the time if you're going through something.
Yeah.
So important. I think it's so
I'm not
important.
always graceful in those transitions, you know.
No, it doesn't
I'm
matter
not
though.
always, it's
Yeah, it
not
doesn't
always
matter.
graceful.
That doesn't matter though. It's still,
Yeah.
because it doesn't make you any less human just because you're able. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're
Yeah.
still going to have those human. But I find that really interesting. I find that most of the women in my life are much better compartmentalizers than the men in my life, because I
Yeah.
think mainly because women have to balance and juggle that much more than men do anyway.
Yeah, I think we're wired for multitasking
Yeah.
naturally. And
Well, you have
so,
to be though. You
yeah.
have to be adaptable,
Mhm.
because you're never given value in the same way that a man is. And I'm not just saying it to be like but that is a fact. It's like
Yeah.
we only have to look at the, very patriarchal and misogynistic built society that we live in. It is that much harder. And I think that's why most men don't uh, compartmentalize well,
Yeah.
unless they're on the spectrum. You know.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. So interesting. All right. Well, I could talk to you for like 3 hours. We could solve all the world's
We
problems.
could, and then
I
tell no one.
All right, I want to make sure we talk about Souvenirs because it's coming
Yes.
out. So it will have already come out by the time this airs,
Right.
but it's called Souvenir.
It is. Yep.
Comes out Friday, March 25th.
That's right. Yep.
Um, talk a little bit about that project.
Well, it was the first solo album I've made since I moved to the United States.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, once I came here, Andrea and I really threw our all in together as Beetroot Revival, and we that's really where we laid all of our prospects. But because we're both very different writers, it was like, out of every 10 songs that I might have written that would have worked, only 2 of them would work for Beetroot Revival. So
Mhm.
I'd have this stockpile of songs each time.
Oh, wow.
And I love to write, like most writers do. Well, I love to write. And so I found myself in like 2019 with some money that I'd saved from touring, and this pile of songs that I was ready to, commit to tape. It was like they were telling a certain story that I wanted to tell. And so I started recording. I got so far through, and then I stopped, and then I went and we made another Beetroot record in the middle that we were committed to doing. And then as I went back to start up again, COVID hit. So a lot of it sat on the shelf for a very long time. And I was only able to go in and out little bits during the end of 2020, really. And it was still a little bit dicey, you know, but I'd also written some other things that fit. I recorded that a lot more than has gone on the, there's 13 songs on the record. And I think I recorded like 22 or something like that.
Wow.
And I mean, most people, I think, unless they're really committed to a certain 12 songs, you'll always over record, you know, you always have a little bit more extra things, and you figure it out as you go along. Yeah, that one's working with this set, or that one isn't, you know. But I got to the end of the process, and then I realized there is a song on it called Souvenir that has now come to have a very different meaning to me than it was when I wrote it. Even though the lyrics express what I want it to be, it was that the album ended up being Souvenir because I feel like that is the souvenir of that period of 2.5, 3 years that I spent, not so much just making the record, but the life that I was living then. Because when that ended, a relationship that I was in ended, and COVID was kind of starting to thankfully kind of peter off to a degree. And I kind of found myself going, wow, this is like, and then I'd written this other bunch of songs in between time that I'm going to start recording at the beginning of next month. So I kind of felt like it was this snapshot. It was this moment in time of the artist that I wanted to be out of that of those experiences. You know, the experience of coming out of one romantic relationship, which was when Andrea and I were together, and then we you know, we were able to what's the word I'm looking for? We were able to, starts with a T. Lucky this isn't live. Transition, there we go, thank you. We were able to transition from being romantic partners to friends, and that wasn't the easiest of processes, as with most people. I mean, we were lucky, no one cheated on anyone or anything like that, but you know, when you live together, work together in a relationship, it's just hard. But so there was that represented by that group of songs, and then this new love that I came into at that point, and then that kind of ending. And so it was like, it really was like a bookended thing.
Yeah.
And when I looked at the songs afterwards, I was just like, wow, it's almost like there's certain parts of it that I almost, maybe in a negative way, but manifested, as in like there were certain things I think my songwriter brain was aware of before my actual brain was. You know, it was like things I probably wasn't willing to face up to. So this record came out of it, and it's been quite a cathartic thing, honestly. It's like, it's been nice because it's the first thing I've done over here. So it's the first solo record I've made in 8 years, and the first I've done here. And it's, anyone who knows me here only knows me through Beetroot Revival. So it's given me also this new palette of colors to be able to display. Oh, well, I do these other things too, you know.
I love that. Good. Well, thank you for doing that and putting that together and getting that, you know.
Well, we'll see. I plan on it selling tens of copies, you know. But no, I mean, it was the doing it that was the most enjoyable part. I mean, I can't wait to go out and do some shows. That's why you do it. Yeah. I can't wait to go out and do some shows. I'm working with some of the guys who work with Jonathan Tyler and the Guthrie Girls. They're two of the guys, John Grossman and Josh Greco, used to be in Uncle Lucius, and a great bass player called Drew Sugar. So I'm going to do some shows with those guys, and my good friend David Jimenez, who played on the album.
I just saw Nuevo play not long ago, and I had never seen them play, and I'm hooked. They were fantastic.
He's my favorite guitar player in Austin, David.
Amazing.
And he's a humble kind of quiet guy.
Totally.
And I mean, we both have a very similar guitar influences in town. We bonded over our joint love of Charlie Sexton. You know? I mean,
Yeah.
we all, I think all of us have a love of Charlie Sexton, whether it's just because we love the way that Charlie looks, but mainly because he's such a great musician and he's such a decent guy as well.
Yeah.
That to me is a kind of, if you look for aspirational things, you know, I look up to Charlie because I think, one, he's not a dick, straight
Yeah.
up, not a dick. He's really dedicated and always has been to his craft. He's a really good guy. He's always helpful to people. He gets involved in so many projects. He's a real giver from
Yeah.
the charitable point of view of all the things he gets involved with, the Austin Music Awards, Ham, Sims. He's like, he's an all-round great guy and a great player.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we're going to get him to produce our next Beetroot Revival album. That's what I'm manifesting.
Oh, wow. Yeah, let's make that happen. Put that
Yeah.
out there.
But no, I'm really looking forward to the album being out there. As I say, it's been my opportunity thus far to, like, you know, I've made some music videos for it. I've got some lyric videos made,
Awesome.
and just kind of being in control of your own pathway without putting too much pressure on well, it needs to have a return. It's like, well, I don't have a ton of money to sink into it, but I do own my masters. I do own, you know, I mean, I own the songs. It's like, I don't have to really make any compromises. I can work with who I want to work with.
Yeah.
So that you know, yeah, there's a massive compromise you make from the point of view of commercial success, but at the end of the day, I'm lucky that the Beetroot thing makes Andrea and I more than enough of a good living, and we get a lot of satisfaction out of getting to play together and doing that aspect. But the solo things, it gives both of us that outlet to then expand that,
Yeah.
and to not have to worry about that side of it too much, you know.
I think you've worked it out perfectly, and you're keeping your your feet planted in the place that you need to plant them, and all the rest is icing. It really is.
I think too many people look at that, though. They'll say, you know, when people talk about settling down as though it's a bad thing,
Yeah.
like planting your feet in the ground, it's the only way that you're able to to grow roots, you know, and the roots are what are going to give you the nourishment, as far as I can see. And I'm lucky, I get to live here. I'm surrounded by so many great people, not just musically, just great people that inspire me, that feed my need for acceptance and for growth and for learning and for empathy and all of those things. So I just think I'm fortunate. I'm very lucky all the time. So anything that comes on top of that is a bonus, but it's only superficial anyway. We've all seen famous people rise and fall. They're still the same people.
Yeah.
Their songs are still either as good or as bad as they were before. It's like nothing changed other than they were trendy and then they weren't.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, I just try and avoid that stuff. It's like, I don't think it serves you. I'm not a believer, although I have a great respect for those who are believers. But to me, if you're going to indulge or investigate your own individual idea of spirituality, to me, is that whole thing about, well, if I want to reach any level of enlightenment, I've got to try and shed all this stuff off. I don't want to keep shackling it to me and then realize I get to the end of my life walking around with the links and the chains that I've made in my life that just weigh you back and weigh you down. You know, we're just like ants. You remember there was that great animated movie called Ants, and Woody Allen plays the main ant, which was great because it's like you couldn't get a more neurotic character. And he's sitting at the beginning of the movie, he's laying in the ant is laying in this analyst's chair, and he says, but, you know, I just feel so insignificant when we are a pack creature. That is what we are.
Yeah.
So all of this individualism, I don't think it helps. You know, it's like no one survives walking through the snow on their own. You know, it's like, you need other people to keep you warm and to keep you, you know, all of those things. So, and I've waffled on way too long.
Well, no, I've fully enjoyed talking to you. And I think, as much as maybe you don't think you have it figured out, I think you have learned a thing or two along the way. And such an inspiration. I love your attitude and your lightness and your vulnerability. And your spirit is just
Well, you're very
absolutely
kind. You really are. And I really
beautiful.
appreciate the fact that you listen to all those things, those songs and stuff. I really appreciate that
Yeah,
because
I really like what you do, and I want people to know who you are, and more importantly, not just who you are and listen to your music, but I I'm thank you for sharing behind the scenes and what's in your head and what's in your heart, and as you walk through this, slice of life, and you're from your perspective, I respect it, and I thank you for sharing it with everybody, and I
no,
also want people to support you. And
thank you for doing this on the flip side of that, because you're giving a platform for all of us to come out and get to
yeah,
speak about these sorts of things, and it's lovely. It's really, that in itself is a refreshing thing, to have people want to actually
yeah.
invest and show interest in what it is that everyone else in the community is doing. That's a vital
Yeah.
thing.
Well, it's an absolute honor and pleasure. And I find so much value in you and those that have been on the show so far and those that will come on.
Yeah. Well, I was pleased
There's
after
so
we had
much
Pat
value.
Byrne on and Johnny Gowdy and Miles. It's like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in hallowed company. I really appreciate it.
Well, I think, I don't know if we said it on air, but when we first got on, you and I met briefly one time, and we did not have a conversation, but when I was thinking about interviewing you and getting ready for this episode, all I could remember was this, your face when I met you. And it was just like you just have this way about you it's just like light and happiness. And you were so like this big smile on your face. And you just seemed like very inviting and very engaging. And
Oh, that's a
I
lot.
just kind of felt like, sometimes you meet people and you're just like, I'm going to know that person, or I'm going to meet them, or I want to,
Yeah.
that's kind of like someone
That's a
I want
really
to,
lovely thing to say. I
yeah,
appreciate it. I
just
mean,
want you to know what you emit and what you put off, even if maybe you don't maybe you're not feeling it one day, but you're still giving off that light, and you certainly give it off through your music. So thank you for your music and for
well,
doing what
thank
you're
you.
supposed to be doing here on this earth, because you are doing the right thing.
Well, we're here for such a short time. We might as well try and have a good time, mightn't we?
Amen to that. Well, on that, we will have to end this episode, but maybe you'll come back another
Oh
time.
yeah, for sure. I want to hear
Okay.
more about. I want to hear more about you and the acting and all these. We've only scratched the surface.
Next time with Ben
Next.
Jones, we'll flip the coin.
That's right with it.
All right. Well, that does it for another episode of the Austin Downbeat. Thanks for tuning in, Ben. Thanks for coming on. It was an
Thank you, Kat.
absolute
Really
joy.
appreciate